The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills of the small African village when an uneasy silence settled across the land. Usually, the morning air carried the sound of women laughing as they walked to the river with clay pots balanced on their heads. Children chased one another through dusty paths while roosters announced the start of a new day. But on this morning, something felt different. The wind blew softly through the tall grass, as if it carried a warning no one could understand. Near the edge of the village stood an old baobab tree, its wide branches stretching toward the sky like giant arms. Beneath that tree lay a tiny bundle wrapped in a faded cloth. At first, no one noticed. Then an elderly woman carrying firewood stopped. She frowned. "Come here," she called nervously. Within minutes, several villagers gathered around. They carefully pulled back the cloth. Inside was a newborn baby girl. She was so small that she fit easily into the old woman's trembling hands. Her tiny fingers reached into the air as she cried with all the strength her little body could find. The villagers looked around. There was no mother, no father, no footprints leading away. Only the lonely child crying beneath the ancient tree. Instead of rushing to comfort her, whispers spread through the crowd. "I heard her mother died during childbirth. They say strange lightning struck the sky the same night. Didn't the cattle become sick yesterday? This child has brought bad luck." Fear moved faster than kindness. Every person stepped back. No one wanted to be the first to touch her. The oldest women in the village shook their heads. "Leave her," one of them whispered. "Some children carry darkness with them." "If anyone raises her," another warned, "misfortune will enter that home." Their words settled heavily over the gathering. Young mothers held their own babies closer. Fathers silently looked away. Even those who felt pity feared what the others might say. The baby's cries grew weaker. She had done nothing wrong. She had not spoken a single word. She had not taken a single step. Yet before she had even lived one full day, the world had already decided who she was. Just as the crowd slowly began walking away, an old widow appeared along the dusty road. Her name was Amina. She owned almost nothing. Her small mud house had a leaking roof. Her garden barely grew enough food to feed herself. Every day was a struggle. But her heart had never become poor. She looked at the crying baby, then at the frightened villagers. "Who left this child?" she asked quietly. No one answered. Instead, one woman stepped forward. "Do not touch her," she warned. "Everyone knows she is cursed." Another added, "If you take her home, you will invite suffering into your life." Amina looked down at the tiny girl once more. The baby's cries had become soft, almost too weak to hear. Slowly, Amina bent down. She lifted the child gently into her arms. The little girl stopped crying almost immediately. For the first time since sunrise, she felt warmth. She felt safety. Amina smiled through tired eyes. "A baby cannot be born with hate inside her," she said softly. "Only people learn hate." The villagers exchanged nervous looks. Some shook their heads. Others whispered prayers under their breath. One man muttered, "She will regret this." But Amina did not listen. She wrapped the child tightly against her chest and began the slow walk back to her small home. Behind her, the whispers only grew louder. "The curse has found its home." Poor Amina. Nothing good will come from this. Days became weeks. Weeks became years. The little girl grew into a quiet child with bright eyes and a gentle smile. Amina loved her as though she had been born from her own heart. She taught her to fetch water, sweep the yard, gather firewood, and always greet people with respect. But love inside one home could not erase the cruelty outside it. Whenever the girl walked through the village, conversations suddenly stopped. Women pulled their children closer. Some people refused to meet her eyes. The children copied everything they heard at home. Whenever she tried to join their games, they ran away. "You can't play with us." "My mother said you're cursed." "If you touch our toys, something bad will happen." She never argued. She simply stood there, watching them laugh together while she remained alone. Many afternoons she sat beneath the same old baobab tree where she had been found years before. She would watch birds build nests together. She would watch baby goats follow their mothers. She wondered why every creature seemed to belong somewhere. Except her. One evening, as the orange sun disappeared behind the hills, she quietly looked up at Amina. Her voice was barely louder than the evening breeze. "Grandmother." Amina looked up from preparing their simple meal. The little girl lowered her eyes. "Why doesn't anyone love me?" The question hung heavily in the silent room. Amina's hands froze. Her heart broke, because she knew the child was finally old enough to feel the weight of the rejection that had surrounded her since the day she was born. She pulled the little girl close, holding her tightly as darkness slowly covered the village. Outside, the whispers of fear still lived. But inside that tiny home, one lonely child searched for an answer that no one had yet been brave enough to give. Several years slipped by like the steady flow of the village river. The tiny baby who had once cried beneath the old baobab tree had grown into a young girl with gentle eyes and a quiet spirit. She was tall for her age, with tightly curled hair, smooth dark skin warmed by the African sun, and a smile that appeared only when she was with Amina. Life had never been easy, but she never complained. Every morning, long before the first rooster crowed, she woke beside Amina in their small mud house. The roof still leaked whenever rain fell, and the walls showed cracks from many seasons of heat and storms. Yet to the girl, it was the only place where she felt safe. As the sky slowly turned from dark blue to soft gold, she lifted 2 empty clay pots onto her shoulders. "I'll fetch the water," she would say with a gentle smile. Amina would nod proudly. "Walk carefully, my child." The journey to the river was long. She crossed dusty paths, climbed over rocks, and past fields where other families worked together. Sometimes she greeted them politely. "Good morning." Most people ignored her. Others simply turned away. She never stopped greeting them. After returning with water, she collected firewood from the nearby forest. Her hands became rough from carrying heavy branches. Later, she helped Amina tend their tiny garden, searching for vegetables that had survived the dry weather. When food was scarce, she wandered through the forest gathering wild berries, roots, and edible leaves. Every evening, she made sure Amina ate first. "You need your strength," she always said. Amina smiled sadly, knowing the girl often pretended she was full while secretly giving away her own share. Even after all those years, the village had not changed its opinion of her. Instead, the fear had grown stronger. Whenever something unfortunate happened, someone always found a way to blame her. One afternoon, the village farmers gathered around a field of dry, yellow crops. The rains had come too late. Much of the harvest had failed. An angry farmer looked across the field until his eyes landed on the young girl carrying a basket of firewood. "There she is." Another man sighed heavily. "Ever since she came here, nothing has been the same." The girl lowered her head and quietly continued walking. She wanted to explain that she had prayed for rain just like everyone else. But she knew they would never listen. A few weeks later, several goats disappeared during the night. The owners searched everywhere. No tracks. No signs. Only empty ropes hanging from wooden fences. Whispers spread once again. It happened because of her. Bad luck follows that girl. Children repeated the same words without understanding them. As if that were not enough, the rainy season arrived with unusual violence. Dark clouds swallowed the sky. Powerful winds tore through the village. Heavy rain flooded homes. Several roofs collapsed. Trees crashed onto fences. Families spent days repairing the damage. As everyone worked together, the young girl quietly joined them. She lifted fallen branches. She carried mud bricks. She helped an elderly man rebuild his fence after it had been destroyed. When she offered him another wooden post, he stepped back. "I don't want your help." She froze. "I only wanted to help." "You've done enough already," he answered coldly. His words hurt far more than the heavy wood resting on her shoulders. Without saying another word, she placed the post on the ground and walked away. That evening she cried alone behind their small house where no one could see her. She looked toward the stars and whispered softly, "What have I done?" No answer came. Only the sound of insects singing in the warm African night. Yet the next morning, she woke before sunrise and continued helping others as if nothing had happened. Kindness had become part of who she was, even when nobody appreciated it. The village's biggest celebration arrived a few months later. It was the Harvest Festival. Drums echoed across the open fields. Women wore brightly colored dresses. Children laughed as they danced around large fires. The smell of roasted maize and fresh bread filled the air. The girl stood quietly at the edge of the celebration. She had never attended before, but she hoped perhaps this year would be different. She watched children her own age singing together. Gathering courage, she slowly stepped forward. Before she could enter, one woman blocked her path. "This celebration is for the village." The girl looked confused. "I live here too." The woman's face remained hard. "You should leave before something bad happens." Several others nodded in agreement. Ashamed, the girl turned around. She walked home alone while joyful music faded behind her. Each drumbeat reminded her that she did not belong. When she reached home, Amina was waiting outside. She had already guessed what had happened. Without asking questions, she opened her arms. The girl rested her head against the old woman's shoulder. "I tried again," she whispered. "I know. They'll never accept me." Amina gently lifted her chin. "My child, listen carefully." The girl wiped away her tears. "People can close their eyes to kindness for many years," Amina said softly. "But kindness never disappears. It waits patiently. One day, it always finds its way back." The girl wanted to believe those words. She truly did. But each day made believing a little harder. Still, something deep inside her refused to give up. Every insult became another reason to become stronger. Every lonely walk taught her patience. Every cruel word planted a silent promise in her heart. She never dreamed of revenge. She never wished for those who hurt her to suffer. Instead, she made a quiet promise to herself beneath the same old baobab tree where her life had begun. "One day," she whispered to the evening wind, "I will prove that they were wrong about me." She did not know how. She did not know when. But hope, though small and fragile, continued to burn inside her heart. And soon, that quiet hope would lead her toward a gift that no one in the village had ever imagined she possessed. The seasons continued to change, and with every passing year, the young girl became wiser. While most people saw only an unwanted child, she had learned to pay attention to the world around her. The village had never welcomed her, so nature became her closest friend. The forest never judged her. The river never whispered cruel words. The wind never called her cursed. Instead, they seemed to speak to her in quiet ways that few others noticed. Whenever she went to collect firewood, she took her time. She watched birds fly across the sky. She studied the leaves on the trees. She listened to the sounds of insects hidden beneath the grass. Little by little, she began seeing patterns. She noticed that when large groups of swallows flew low over the fields, rain usually came within 2 days. She saw that when the ants hurried to carry food deep into their hills, a heavy storm often followed. When the wind carried the sweet smell of wet earth before clouds had even formed, she knew rain was already on its way. At first, she kept these discoveries to herself. No one would believe her anyway. One afternoon, she passed a group of farmers staring nervously at the clear sky. One of them sighed. "We'll have to wait another week before planting." The young girl looked toward the distant hills. Dark clouds were slowly gathering far beyond the mountains. She quietly spoke. "I think the rain will come tomorrow." The men laughed. One farmer shook his head. "Child, we've been farming longer than you've been alive." Another smiled sarcastically. "Go fetch your firewood. Leave farming to grown men." She simply nodded and walked away. The next afternoon, thunder rolled across the sky. Heavy rain poured over the village for hours. The farmers stood silently beneath their shelters, watching water soak the fields they had believed would remain dry. No one admitted she had been right, but a few quietly remembered her words. As time passed, something even stranger happened. She seemed to understand animals in ways no one could explain. She noticed when goats became restless before predators appeared nearby. She could tell when birds suddenly fell silent because danger was approaching through the forest. One evening, while gathering wood, she froze. The monkeys high in the trees had stopped making noise. Small antelope were running deeper into the forest. Even the birds had disappeared. Something wasn't right. She hurried home. "Everyone should bring their animals inside tonight," she told Amina. "Why?" "I don't know exactly, but the forest feels afraid." Amina trusted her. That night, a hungry leopard wandered into the village searching for food. Most families lost chickens and goats. Amina's animals remained safely locked away. Word quietly spread. How did they know? No one had an answer. Still, Many refused to believe it was anything more than luck. Soon afterward, another discovery changed everything. One afternoon, while helping Amina collect firewood deep inside the forest, she noticed an elderly woman lying beside a narrow path. The woman had fallen while gathering herbs. Her ankle was badly swollen. She winced in pain with every movement. The young girl knelt beside her. "We need to help you." The woman tried to stand but cried out. As the girl looked around, she remembered something she had often seen. Near the base of a large tree grew broad green leaves with tiny purple flowers. She had watched injured animals rub against the same plant. She had also seen monkeys chew its leaves before pressing them onto small cuts. Carefully, she gathered a handful. She crushed the leaves between two smooth stones until they became a cool green paste. "I hope this helps," she whispered. She gently placed the mixture over the swollen ankle before wrapping it with clean cloth. The elderly woman looked doubtful. But after resting for a while, the pain slowly eased. By sunset, she was able to walk with only a slight limp. She stared at the young girl in surprise. "You learned this from a healer." The girl smiled softly. "No. Then how?" "I watched the forest." The old woman never forgot those words. Over the following months, people began noticing something unusual. Whenever children scraped their knees while playing, the girl quietly cleaned the wounds with herbs from the forest. Whenever an elder complained of fever, she prepared warm drinks made from leaves and roots she had carefully studied. Whenever someone suffered insect bites, she knew which plants soothed the itching. She never asked for money. She never expected praise. She simply helped because helping felt right. Slowly, people recovered. A child whose wound had become infected healed much faster than expected. An old fisherman found relief from painful joints after using the leaves she suggested. A young mother thanked her when a simple herbal tea eased her son's stubborn cough. For the first time in many years, whispers about the girl began to change. One evening, two women spoke quietly beside the village well. "Maybe we've judged her unfairly. She has helped many people. I've never seen someone so kind." Hope quietly entered conversations where fear had lived for years. But not everyone welcomed the change. Some villagers grew even more suspicious. One angry elder stood in the center of the marketplace. "Open your eyes," he shouted. "How can an ordinary girl know these things?" Another man nodded. "She speaks to animals. She predicts the weather. She heals the sick. That is not natural." Fear quickly returned. Someone whispered the word that froze the crowd. "Magic." The accusation spread from one house to another faster than wildfire through dry grass. Some people who had accepted her help suddenly stopped visiting. Parents warned their children to stay away again. Even those who had recovered because of her kindness became afraid of defending her publicly. The young girl heard every rumor. Each one hurt. But instead of answering with anger, she continued gathering herbs. She continued helping anyone who came to her door. She continued smiling, even when smiles were not returned. One evening, as she and Amina sat outside watching the sunset paint the African sky with deep shades of orange and red, Amina gently placed a hand on hers. "You've brought healing where others expected harm," she said quietly. "But people are still afraid." Amina nodded. "Fear is stubborn. It takes time for hearts to change." The young girl looked toward the distant forest, where birds were returning to their nests. For the first time in her life, she realized something important. She did not need everyone to believe in her. She only needed to keep doing what was right. Because somewhere beneath all the fear, the truth was slowly beginning to grow. And before long, that truth would be tested by a disaster far greater than anyone in the village could imagine. The months passed, and the whispers about the young girl slowly faded into the background. Some people still feared her. Others quietly respected her. But before anyone could decide what to believe, nature brought a disaster that was far greater than fear itself. It began with silence. The rainy season arrived, but no rain came. Each morning, the villagers looked toward the sky, hoping to see dark clouds rolling across the horizon. Instead, the sun rose brighter than ever. Day after day, it burned without mercy. The rich brown soil slowly turned gray. Tiny cracks appeared across the fields. Those cracks became deep wounds in the earth, stretching farther with every passing week. The air itself felt dry enough to steal every drop of moisture from a person's breath. Children who once laughed while running through green fields now walked quietly through clouds of dust. The village waited. Tomorrow, they told themselves. The rain will come tomorrow. But tomorrow never changed. Soon the river that had served the village for generations began to shrink. Every morning, women walked farther than the day before to collect water. The once powerful current became a narrow stream, then a series of muddy pools. Finally, nothing remained except cracked stones lying beneath the burning sun. The sound of flowing water disappeared from the village for the first time in living memory. The young girl stood beside the empty riverbed, her heart heavy. She had never seen the land look so lifeless. Even the birds had stopped singing. Without water, the crops had no chance. The maize withered before it could produce grain. Bean plants dried into brittle stalks. Vegetables turned yellow and collapsed into the dusty ground. Farmers walked through their fields in silence. Many knelt and picked up handfuls of dry soil, letting it slip through their fingers like lost hope. One old farmer wiped tears from his face. "I've worked this land for 40 years." His voice trembled. "I've never seen anything like this." As the weeks stretched into months, the animals began to suffer. Goats grew thin. Cows stumbled weakly across empty grazing land. Chickens stopped laying eggs. One by one, livestock collapsed beneath the relentless heat. Each dead animal meant another family losing its only source of food or income. The village that had once echoed with the sounds of healthy animals became painfully quiet. Hunger arrived soon after. Families who had always shared meals together suddenly struggled to fill even one small bowl each day. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat. Children cried through the night with empty stomachs. Some mothers quietly wept after pretending there was enough food left for tomorrow. There wasn't. Even Amina and the young girl began eating only once each day. Whenever Amina tried giving her extra food, the girl gently pushed the bowl back. "You need it more than I do." Amina smiled sadly. "And you always say the same thing." Neither admitted how hungry they truly were. As hope faded, the village elders gathered beneath the old baobab tree. The chief sat surrounded by respected leaders. Traditional healers burned herbs. They prayed. They performed ancient ceremonies passed down through generations. They asked their ancestors for guidance. Days passed. Nothing changed. The sky remained empty. The ground remained dry. The wells continued sinking lower. For the first time in many years, even the elders had no answers. People began asking difficult questions. If the healers cannot help us, what will? Fear slowly became anger. Soon arguments broke out almost every day. At the village well, women fought over the last buckets of muddy water. Neighbors accused one another of stealing food. Brothers argued over dying livestock. Families who had lived peacefully for decades suddenly became divided by desperation. One evening, raised voices echoed across the village square. "We can't stay here anymore. We'll all die if we remain." Another man shouted back, "And where will you go?" "Anywhere there is water." Before long, several families began packing their belongings. Clay pots, blankets, tools, whatever they could carry. Some planned to walk for days in search of another village. Others had no destination at all. They simply believed leaving offered a better chance than staying. The young girl watched with growing sadness. If everyone scattered across the land, the village would disappear forever. That night, unable to sleep, she sat outside beneath the stars. The warm wind carried dust instead of cool evening air. She closed her eyes and tried to remember everything she had learned during her many journeys through the forest. Then, a forgotten memory returned. Years earlier, while searching for medicinal plants far beyond the hills, she had wandered into a valley few people ever visited. There, hidden beneath thick vines and enormous rocks, she had found the remains of an ancient stone well. An old hunter she had met nearby told her a story. "My grandfather spoke of a hidden spring beneath these hills," he had said. "They say it never dries." At the time, she had listened with curiosity. Now, those words returned with surprising clarity. Her heart began to beat faster. Could it still exist? Could there truly be water hidden beneath the earth? The next morning, she hurried to the gathering of village elders. The people looked exhausted. Their faces showed weeks of fear and hunger. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "I think I know where we might find water." The crowd turned toward her. Some listened. Others immediately frowned. She spoke calmly. When I was younger, I explored a distant valley beyond the western forest. I found signs of an old underground spring. If it's still there, it could save us. Silence filled the air. For one brief moment, hope flickered across a few tired faces. Then an angry voice shattered it. Enough. It was the same elder who had once accused her of practicing forbidden magic. Now she claims to know secrets hidden beneath the earth. Several villagers nodded. Another man crossed his arms. We are starving, and she wants us chasing fairy tales. Someone else laughed bitterly. Perhaps she'll ask the birds where to dig. The crowd erupted into nervous laughter. The young girl stood perfectly still. She had expected doubt, but the cruelty still stung. She looked toward the chief. I truly believe the spring is real. The old chief lowered his tired eyes. We cannot waste our last strength on stories. Those words cut deeper than any insult. Without another word, she stepped away from the gathering. As she walked home, she could hear people whispering behind her once again. She's making things worse. She's desperate. She's imagining things. Only Amina believed her. That evening, the old widow sat beside her outside their small home. I know that look, Amina said gently. You've seen something others cannot. The young girl nodded slowly. I don't know if I can prove it. Amina placed a weathered hand over hers. You've spent your whole life seeing what others ignored. She looked toward the dry hills glowing beneath the setting sun. Perhaps this time, they will have no choice but to follow you. The young girl stared into the distance, where the forgotten valley lay hidden beyond the forest. Deep inside her heart, one truth had become stronger than fear. If the village refused to search for the hidden spring, she would search for it herself, even if she had to risk everything to do it. The morning after the village elders rejected her idea, the young girl rose before dawn. The sky was still dark, and the air carried the dry smell of dust instead of rain. She quietly packed a small woven bag with the few things she owned, a gourd for water, a little dried maize, a knife for cutting vines, and a bundle of medicinal herbs. Amina watched from the doorway. You've already made your decision, the old widow said softly. The young girl nodded. If I stay here, everyone will continue waiting for rain that may never come. And if you leave, I may not come back. Amina's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled with pride instead of fear. She placed both hands on the girl's shoulders. You were never cursed, my child. She paused before continuing. You were sent here for a reason. The young girl hugged her tightly. If I find the spring, I'll come back for everyone. And if you don't? She looked toward the distant western hills. At least I'll know I tried. Without another word, she began walking away from the village. The rising sun cast her long shadow across the dry earth. For a while, she believed she would travel alone. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. 3 young villagers were following at a distance. The first was Kofi, a strong young farmer whose family had almost no food left. The second was Nola, whose younger brothers had grown weak from hunger. The third was Django, a quiet hunter who had spent years exploring the nearby forests. Kofi folded his arms awkwardly. We still don't know if you're right. Nola nodded. But doing nothing won't save us. Django simply adjusted the spear resting on his shoulder. I know these forests. I'll help keep everyone safe. The young girl's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you. It was the first time in her life that anyone from the village had chosen to trust her. Together, the 4 travelers disappeared into the wilderness. The journey quickly became more difficult than anyone expected. The familiar paths soon vanished. Thick bushes blocked their way. Sharp rocks cut their feet. Steep hills forced them to climb using both hands. The heat grew stronger with every passing hour. Sometimes they walked for miles without seeing a single stream. The forest itself seemed tired from the drought. Leaves hung lifeless from branches. Even the air felt heavy. On the 3rd day, danger found them. As they crossed a narrow valley, Django suddenly raised his hand. Stop! Everyone froze. Fresh lion tracks covered the dusty ground. Large tracks. Very fresh. The young girl quietly studied the nearby grass. She noticed frightened birds flying away from a cluster of trees. Without speaking loudly, she whispered, "The Pride is still nearby." Her calm voice kept everyone focused. Instead of panicking, she carefully led the group around a rocky hillside where the wind carried their scent away from the predators. For nearly an hour, they moved silently. Only after reaching higher ground did Django finally breathe again. "I didn't even notice the birds." The young girl smiled gently. "The forest always warns us." The journey continued. Days passed. The small amount of food they carried slowly disappeared. Each meal became smaller than the one before. Soon they shared only a few handfuls of dried maize each day. Their stomachs ached with hunger. Their legs felt heavy. Still, they refused to turn back. One afternoon, they reached a steep mountain pass covered with loose stones. Crossing it took hours. Several times they nearly slipped into the rocky valley below. Nola stumbled and scraped her hands badly. The young girl quickly cleaned the wounds using leaves from nearby plants. "We are almost there," she encouraged her. "How do you know?" Kofi asked. "I can feel it." Though exhausted, something inside her refused to give up. She remembered every landmark from years before. The shape of the cliffs, the twisted trees, the narrow trail between two giant rocks. They were getting closer, but hope was beginning to fade for the others. On the fifth evening, the group stopped beneath a large tree. They had almost nothing left to eat. The silence around their small fire felt heavier than the darkness. Finally, Kofi stood up. "This is enough." Everyone looked at him. "We've searched for days. There is no spring. We are wasting the little strength we have left." He looked directly at the young girl. "I'm going back." For a moment, no one spoke. The young girl slowly stood. "I understand why you're tired." "We all are." She looked at each of them. "If you want to return, I won't stop you." Then she pointed toward the western hills. "But I have spent my whole life listening to this land. I've trusted it before. And it has never lied to me." Her voice remained calm. "If there is even one chance to save our village, I have to keep walking." The quiet determination in her words touched something deep inside the others. Django stepped beside her. "I'm staying." Nola smiled weakly. "So am I." Kofi looked from one face to another. After a long silence, he sighed. "I've already come this far." A small smile crossed the young girl's face. "Then tomorrow, we finish this together." The next morning, they entered the hidden valley she had remembered. Much had changed since her last visit. Many trees had withered. Vines covered the ancient stone ruins. At first glance, it looked completely abandoned. The others searched the valley with disappointed expressions. "There isn't any water," Kofi muttered. But the young girl wasn't looking at the ground. She was watching life. She noticed several green trees growing together while everything around them remained dry. She watched tiny birds flying repeatedly toward the same area. Then she saw something even more surprising. A line of fresh animal tracks. Antelope, wild pigs, small monkeys, all leading toward a patch of earth hidden beneath thick grass. She knelt quietly. She touched the soil. It felt cooler, softer. She closed her eyes. "This is the place." The others looked doubtful. "There isn't any water here," Nola said. "There will be." She picked up a fallen branch and began digging. At first, she worked alone. The others watched. Then Django joined her. Soon Nola and Kofi grabbed stones and wooden sticks. Hour after hour, they dug beneath the burning sun. Their hands blistered. Their muscles ached. Sweat poured down their faces. Still, nothing. Kofi leaned against his shovel. "I don't think." Before he could finish speaking, the young girl struck the ground one more time. A faint cracking sound echoed beneath them. She froze. "Did you hear that?" Everyone became silent. She dug again. This time the soil suddenly collapsed inward. A moment later, a tiny trickle of water appeared. No one moved. They stared in disbelief. The trickle quickly became a stream. Then, with a deep rumbling sound from beneath the earth, clear water burst upward through the opening. It splashed across the dry ground, sparkling like liquid glass beneath the afternoon sun. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Nola laughed through tears. "It's real." Kofi dropped to his knees. I don't believe it. Django cupped his hands beneath the flowing water and drank deeply. It's cold. It's fresh. The young girl simply stood there, tears running silently down her face. Not because she had been proven right, but because she knew the village still had a future. The 4 travelers filled every container they carried. Then they began the long journey home. This time, their steps felt lighter. Behind them, the ancient spring continued flowing, hidden beneath the hills for generations. Ahead of them waited a village that still doubted her. But very soon, those doubts would be washed away by the same water that had saved them all. When the young girl and her 3 companions returned to the village, they were greeted by worried faces. For days, everyone had believed they were gone forever. Children were the first to notice them walking across the dusty path. They're back, one boy shouted. They came back. Within moments, the entire village gathered near the entrance. The travelers looked exhausted. Their clothes were torn. Their hands were covered with blisters. But their eyes carried something they had not seen in weeks. Hope. Without saying a word, the young girl lifted a clay container. She poured its contents into a wooden bowl. Clear, fresh water sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. A stunned silence spread across the crowd. An old woman stepped forward with trembling hands. She dipped her fingers into the bowl. It's real, she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. The chief tasted the water next. His voice shook. Fresh. The young girl calmly explained everything. She described the hidden valley, the ancient spring, the long journey, the signs that had led her there. For the first time in her life, nobody interrupted her. Nobody laughed. Nobody called her cursed. Instead, the villagers listened with complete silence. The next morning, dozens of men and women followed her back to the hidden spring. Working together, they cleared the old path. They built simple channels to guide water toward the village. Days later, fresh water flowed once again into the empty fields. The dying crops slowly came back to life. The remaining livestock finally had water to drink. Children laughed as they splashed their hands in the cool streams. The village celebrated as if life itself had returned. Drums echoed through the night. Songs filled the air. Families shared meals again. For the first time in many years, every smile was genuine. The young girl stood quietly at the edge of the celebration, watching everyone dance together. She smiled softly. Seeing others happy was enough. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly man slowly stood from his seat beneath the old baobab tree. His back was bent with age. His face carried the weight of many difficult years. Everyone respected him because he was the oldest living person in the village. He raised one trembling hand. I have something to say. The music slowly stopped. Conversations faded. Every eye turned toward him. He looked at the young girl with deep sadness. My child. His voice cracked. There is a truth this village should have told you long ago. A heavy silence settled over the gathering. The old man took a deep breath. You were never abandoned because your parents didn't love you. The young girl's heart skipped a beat. She stared at him in disbelief. What do you mean? The old man lowered his eyes. Many years ago, before you were born, armed raiders attacked this village. Fear spread across the faces of those listening. The attack came without warning. Houses burned. People ran for their lives. Many believed the village would be destroyed. The crowd listened without moving. Your father was one of the bravest men this village had ever known. He gathered several others and stood against the attackers. He fought so the women, children, and elders could escape. The old man's voice became quieter. He never returned. The young girl's breathing grew heavier. And, my mother. The elder closed his eyes. She gave birth to you only hours after learning your father had died. She was badly injured. Before sunrise, she also passed away. The young girl felt her knees weaken. Everything she had believed about her life suddenly changed. They didn't leave me. The old man slowly shook his head. No, they gave everything they had to protect this village. Tears rolled silently down her face. The celebration had become completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. But the old man's confession was not finished. There is more. Several village elders lowered their heads before he even spoke. After the attack, fear ruled this village. Some powerful men were supposed to protect everyone. They failed. They were ashamed. They needed someone else to blame. The crowd exchanged nervous looks. The old man continued, "Your parents owned one of the richest pieces of farmland near the river. When they died, certain leaders wanted that land for themselves. They spread lies. They claimed strange signs appeared on the night you were born. They called you cursed. They frightened everyone, so no one would question what they had done." The crowd gasped. The young girl stared at the elders. None of them denied it. The village chief slowly stepped forward. His shoulders seemed heavier than ever before. The stories were false. His voice trembled with regret. There was never a curse. We allowed fear to become stronger than truth. Another elder wiped tears from his eyes. "We failed your parents. We failed Amina. And worst of all," he looked directly at the young girl, "we failed you." One by one, the elders lowered themselves to their knees before her. The villagers watched in complete silence. Many had never seen their leaders bow before anyone. The chief spoke again. "Please forgive us." The young girl could barely find her voice. She looked across the crowd. Many people who had once ignored her now stood with tears streaming down their faces. The farmer who had blamed her for failed crops looked ashamed. The woman who had refused her entry into the harvest festival covered her face as she cried. Parents held their children close, realizing they had passed their own fear to the next generation. Even Kofi, Nola, and Django stood quietly, remembering how they had once doubted her. Then Amina slowly walked forward. She smiled through tears and gently took the young girl's hands. "I've waited many years for this day." The young girl looked at her. "You knew." Amina nodded softly. "I knew enough. I knew your parents were honorable people. I knew they loved this village. And when I first held you in my arms," she gently touched the girl's face, "I never saw a cursed child. I saw a little girl whose life had a purpose." The young girl wrapped her arms around Amina and wept, not from sadness alone, but from relief. For the first time in her life, she finally knew who she was. She was not the cursed child beneath the baobab tree. She was the daughter of two courageous people who had given everything to save others. She carried not a curse, but a legacy of courage, kindness, and sacrifice. As the villagers watched the two embrace, many quietly wiped away their tears. The lies that had divided the village for so many years had finally been uncovered. The truth had brought pain, but it had also opened the first door toward healing. And for the first time since the day she was born, the young woman was no longer seen as the girl nobody wanted. She was finally beginning to be recognized for who she had always been. The morning after the truth was revealed, the village awoke with heavy hearts. The sun rose over the same hills. The birds sang the same songs. The baobab tree still stood proudly at the edge of the village. Everything looked familiar, yet nothing felt the same. For the first time in many years, the villagers looked at the young woman not with fear, but with shame. Word spread quickly that the chief had called everyone to gather beneath the ancient baobab tree. By midday, the entire village had assembled. Men stood silently with lowered heads. Women held their children close. Even the children, who once laughed at the lonely girl, now looked at her with curious and gentle eyes. The chief slowly stepped forward. His walking stick trembled slightly in his hand. He faced the young woman before turning toward the crowd. "For many years," he began, "we allowed lies to become stronger than truth. We judged an innocent child. We repaid kindness with cruelty. We listened to fear instead of our hearts." He took a slow breath. "Today, before our ancestors and before every family gathered here," he lowered himself onto one knee, "I ask for your forgiveness." A deep silence filled the village. Then something remarkable happened. One after another, the elders knelt beside him. The farmers followed. The women followed. Even those who had insulted her the most lowered their heads. The woman who had once turned her away from the harvest festival stepped forward with tears streaming down her face. "I cannot erase the pain I caused you. But I am deeply sorry." The elderly man who had refused her help after the storm wiped his eyes. "You offered me kindness when I offered you nothing. I was wrong." Soon the entire gathering echoed with quiet voices. "We are sorry. Please forgive us. We should have known better." The young woman stood silently, overwhelmed by the sight before her. These were the same people who had ignored her tears. The same people who had called her cursed. The same people who had made her feel alone. For a brief moment, the pain of those years returned. She remembered the empty playground, the lonely walks home, the night she had cried in Amina's arms. She could have reminded everyone of every cruel word they had spoken. She could have demanded justice. She could have walked away forever. Instead, she remembered something Amina had told her long ago. Kindness never disappears. It waits patiently. One day, it always finds its way back. She slowly stepped toward the chief. With gentle hands, she helped him rise to his feet. "You don't need to kneel before me," she said softly. The chief looked into her eyes. "After everything we've done." She smiled through tears. "If I hold on to anger, then fear will still control our village." She turned toward everyone gathered beneath the tree. "I forgive you." Many people began crying openly. It was not because they deserved forgiveness. It was because they never expected to receive it. The weight that had rested upon the village for so many years finally began to lift. A few days later, the village elders gathered once again. This time, their meeting was very different. The chief spoke first. "Our village survived because of your wisdom." He looked toward the young woman. "We would be honored if you accepted a place beside the village council." The crowd nodded in agreement. "We need someone who sees what others miss. Someone who listens before judging. Someone who serves instead of seeking power." The young woman looked surprised. "I've never led anyone." The chief smiled. "You already have." After speaking with Amina, she accepted the invitation, not for honor, but to help ensure that no child would ever suffer as she had. From that day forward, the village slowly transformed. She worked alongside the farmers, teaching them how to watch the seasons, protect the soil, and plant crops at the right time by reading the signs of nature. Harvests became stronger each year. She organized teams to keep the ancient spring clean and build simple water channels so every family had access to fresh water. Women no longer walked long distances carrying heavy clay pots. Children grew healthier because clean water reached every home. She encouraged the elders to build a small learning shelter beneath the shade of large trees. There, children learned to read, count, care for nature, and respect one another. Most importantly, every child sat together. No one was left outside. No one was called cursed. When someone became sick, she shared the knowledge of medicinal plants that the forest had taught her. She also encouraged younger villagers to learn these skills so the knowledge would never disappear. Soon, the village had helpers who cared for the elderly, treated injuries, and protected the health of every family. Months turned into years. The dusty village that had once been filled with fear slowly became known for its kindness. Fields stretched across the land in bright shades of green. The sound of flowing water returned. Laughter echoed through the village once again. The greatest change, however, was found in the children. One afternoon, the young woman was sitting beneath the same baobab tree where she had once cried alone. A group of children ran toward her. "Will you tell us another story? Can you show us the healing plants? Can we walk with you into the forest tomorrow?" She smiled as they crowded around her. These were the children of those who had once rejected her. Yet she welcomed every one of them with open arms. She wanted them to inherit wisdom, not prejudice. As the years passed, travelers from neighboring villages began arriving. They came to see the woman who had discovered the hidden spring, the woman who understood the forest, the woman whose kindness had saved an entire community. Some expected to meet a famous leader. Instead, they found a humble woman working beside farmers, laughing with children, and caring for the elderly. Her story spread farther than anyone imagined. People no longer spoke of the cursed child beneath the baobab tree. They spoke of the woman who chose forgiveness over revenge, the woman who united a broken village, the woman who proved that compassion is stronger than fear. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amina and the young woman sat together outside their little home, the same home where love had first protected a forgotten child. The old widow smiled as she watched children playing nearby. "They love you now," she whispered. The young woman looked at the joyful faces. They always could have. Amina nodded. They simply needed someone brave enough to show them how. The young woman gently took Amina's hand. If you hadn't picked me up that morning beneath the baobab tree. She paused, her voice trembling. None of this would have been possible. Amina smiled warmly. I only carried you home. She looked proudly across the thriving village. You carried everyone else. As darkness settled gently over the land, the village lights glowed with warmth and peace. The fear that had once divided neighbors had been replaced by trust. The lies that had stolen one little girl's childhood had been defeated by truth. And the child whom nobody wanted became the heart of the very village that had once rejected her. Her life became a lasting reminder that love can grow in the hardest places, forgiveness can heal the deepest wounds, and one act of compassion has the power to change generations.